Wine is a mocker, beer is a brawler, and whoever staggers because of them is not wise. Proverbs 21.
Welcome back to the Go to Hell podcast. Strong opinions, weekly held about Christianity, pop culture, and beer. Here are your hosts, Tim Curley and Colton Pierce.
Drinking Pliny for president. It's not new to the show. But boy, is it delicious every time you have it. So, every time you have it, delicious. Typical Russian River flavor profile. Triple IPA, though. Coming in at 9%, 8.7, something like that. I don't know.
So, we'll talk a little bit more. We'll finish this up by talking about it. Maybe a little more politics as more news is broken. I'm a little concerned. Well, so we talked about the long-range weapons last week.
Yeah.
Some of the details that have come out have made it make it look even worse of a decision. Although I also stand by, I think, some people on the right who are for whatever reason against the war, and I say for whatever reason. I think some people are just opposed because they're opposed. They're really not that. They're just trying to make political hay.
Yeah, I think people are opposed because the other side decided to make the decision. It was like if they would have done it on their side.
I think there's some. I think there's, in terms of the chattering class.
Is not
yes.
Is that not where you were going with that? I was like,
yeah, I would say a good portion of the right wing chattering class is just upset because
the Democrats
because Biden got him into it and all that. But I think if Trump had decided to support Zelensky, they'd be all shut up.
Which,
Putin
just so we're
lover.
clear, I believe that about the majority of politics is that people believe that they're so ingrained in what they think their party is right, is that no matter what decision they do, it's right, and whatever the decision is that the other side does is wrong. And so I think a lot of people...
That's certainly the case about domestic politics. I think that's new to foreign policy. And so the charlatans on the Trump side that are engaged in that need to knock it off because we, as I've said, since this started and once the Israel-Palestine mess started, I am not saying you have to be for Russia or for Palestine or anti-Israel or anti-Ukraine, but for the love of God, can we have a healthy and hopefully Christian-led, but it doesn't have to be Christian-led. Can we have some healthy percentage, a quarter or a third of the country saying, you know what, I don't know that the way we're engaged in this is healthy for the country, or I'm just flat out against war. I don't think we should be sticking our noses into anything unless there is an imminent threat to the United States and Ukraine's not a threat and we shouldn't be supporting this bloodletting. We need to have healthy, honest people making those arguments, and we shouldn't have, I think, the Charlie Kirks of the world, if I'm picking on somebody who I think's being a charlatan about it, is just upset about it because it makes it easy to make Trump's case. Although all indications so far, despite picking Tulsi and some of these other people, that he had one of his national security advisors, I heard yesterday, saying there's no difference between us and the Biden administration on Ukraine and yada, yada, yada. So I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. I'm not. I didn't expect anything out of Trump on that. I thought a lot of it was bluster. And a lot of him saying that there's no difference between Trump and Biden on this might be bluster as well, and quietly there's stuff going on behind the scenes. We have to allow, when it comes to foreign policy, stuff being quietly done and and whatnot. So all that said, it came out that it was the weapons being launched, which is why I think it's only happened twice, I think. I haven't heard of any more long-range weapon strikes.
There haven't been any long-range weapons being shot.
The thing about it is, the United States and or Britain are directly involved when those weapons are fired. You say, well, no, we just provide the weapons. No, the Ukrainians do not have the technology to target the weapon where it lands without using U.S. in the case of the U.S. long-range weapon and Britain in the case of the British long-range weapon to target them. So, yes, a Ukrainian might be pushing the button to launch, but somewhere in there is either a U.S. Army or Air Force or contractor doing the actual targeting to where the weapon hits. So we're getting ourselves directly involved, and I think, personally, I think that's an impeachable offense. In my world, that's an impeachable offense. The President of the United States should not be able to do that. That is not an imminent threat, which is allowed in the Constitution. There's no imminent threat right now from Russia to the United States. It is a very indirect threat, and Congress should be stepping up and saying, knock it off. That's not authorized. We've not authorized war against Russia, and helping people target sites in Russia hasn't been authorized by this government. So, so that came out, and then 2 days of summertime over the weekend, it got leaked. And I can't make heads or tails when something gets leaked. You have to sit there and say who leaked it and why. I can make arguments on either way why it got leaked, but it got leaked that the United States is thinking about handing over tactical nukes to Ukraine, or possibly giving them back their nuclear weapons that we took from them when they became independent, and the Soviet weapons that they had, we took into our stockpiles. That one seems convoluted to me. I don't think we've been maintaining those for use, so that one didn't pass the smell test. But somebody's leaking that for some purpose, either because it's true and they're trying to keep Biden from doing it, or they think it's going to scare the Russians into backing down. I don't know, but whatever that is, that shit needs to needs to be knocked off as well.
You also had the first ever mid-range ballistic missile used.
Oh yeah, by the Russians.
People made that into a bigger thing than it was, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, it's huge. You're using experimental technology. This technology can also house nuclear warheads or tactical nukes. And so, yeah, I get it. But technically, so could the United States missile systems that they were using. I was like, it's very interesting. It's the rules of war kind of engagement stuff that's always confusing to me when people are like shocked by the use of new technology in a war, or where it's like, yeah, like the United States has access to a lot of that stuff, right? We have access to those same types of missiles, same types of stuff. And so it's kind of like, okay, so at what point do you use it? Like, we have all this technology, we have all this stuff that we have, and at what point do we sit there and we say that we use it? And so the United States gave the Ukraine this one-up on their technology, and so Russia decided to respond in kind and sit there and say, okay, so if you'd like to one-up, then we will one-up you. And luckily, that was the worst of it. And since then, there hasn't been a response from either one back and forth yet. Yeah, I'm sitting here and I really hope that there's not a lot of speculation out there or ideas of giving Ukraine back tactical nuclear weaponry. I'm like, what does that achieve? what is that? I don't even know what saying that or leaking that does for anybody. Like, that doesn't help anything. If anything, that, again, that's escalating the whole situation. So that's problematic. Where again, this is kind of what we talked about last week, is like, when is somebody going to step up and say, hey, we're not doing this? Like, we're not playing these fucking games, I was like, we need to be diplomatic about things, but nobody wants to be diplomatic because, again, kind of what we talked about last week, where it's like, we got to stop Hitler from taking over the world. Because nobody wanted to sit there and have a conversation with Hitler and try to get him to calm down. And because if we would have, then he would have killed all of the Jews. And, and it is a hard line, right? Like, I don't know. I was like, even if he just killed all the Jews in Germany, right? We sit there and we have a diplomatic, we sit there and we go through diplomacy with Hitler. He takes over Austria, he takes over Poland. Those countries are okay with being under Hitler's reign or whatever. They're like, yeah, we're loyal to Germany anyways. Our country's been shit for years, blah, blah, blah. And so we sit there and we say, hey, like, you can have this territory. That's not a problem. Just, like, pipe down over there, blah, yada, yada. And then he goes and he systematically kills every Jew in that area. That would still be horrific, and he'd still kill millions of people. And that would not be okay. But at what point? Yeah, and so that's the hard part, where you look at somebody like...
Well, that's where Americans have revisionist history,
Sure.
to be perfectly honest. Our perspective of World War II is a myth. We had no problem standing by and doing nothing about Hitler. There was no mood in the country to insert itself into Europe until
Pearl
Harbor.
Which, I am saying that, I'm not saying that we had any intention of ending anything. And which, just so we're clear, I think currently nobody has any intention of stopping whatever kind of systematic oppression that Putin has going on in his country for a variety of different people.
Well,
I don't think that they have any intention of stopping any of that anytime soon, in the same way that Jews were getting mass murdered. They're just going to sit there and say that's their problem, it's their country. They need to be able to figure that stuff out themselves. But yet, as soon as they invade somewhere, then it becomes, okay, well, wait a minute. But nobody's being diplomatic. And again, this is politics. There's no clear answer. There's no good way. You're dealing with other people from different cultures, dealing with different shit. Like, they're going through different shit over there than we're going through over here. Like, I don't have a solution. But I'm still saying that it sucks either fucking way. I don't blame anybody who's sitting there. And saying we need to save people that have been forcibly made a part of Russia right now. I see where they come from on that. I get that.
I don't have much tolerance for that, because the part that's been ceded back into Russia is largely Russian speaking and was being terrorized by the Ukrainian government before this all happened, because this is a muddied thing.
Yeah, but also, like, again,
this is a century, like a centuries old, if almost like a millennium old battle. I mean, it's just this. I don't understand the fixation with borders that were set 20 years ago as being like the thing we've got to die for. Let's also not forget, which is one reason no one wants to talk about this, and or no one wants to, or most people are not educated enough. And I don't mean that to sound condescending. I don't expect people to know this. Western Ukraine was mostly Poland for a long time. Western Ukraine got taken away from Poland after World War II because the Russians wanted it. It's just we get really uppity, and we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want everything. We want to treat the rest of the world we want to cajole everyone and judge everyone by how they follow our rules and our better morality, and yet we don't judge ourselves on those old rules. We had no business sticking our nose in Libya, and we went in there and overthrew a Libyan government and created a living hell. We had no business sticking our nose in Syria. We went in there and did it.
Yeah, I just think when I think of what it is that we're talking about and why people are upset about it, I'm pushing back on you a little bit, where I think the reason why people are sticking their noses in things, and I'm not saying it's a good reason, but I'm saying that it is the reason, is that people are expecting that we are over the whole like World War thing, and that we're not conquerors anymore.
Wait. What do you mean by pushing back?
Oh, I'm saying that I'm pushing back on you on your idea that you're like, I'm kind of sick of this whole thing, and you're like, people need to, like, this was their territory like 20 years ago or whatever. And I'm like, I get that. But also, the idea is from everybody else, or the idea that people are getting upset over, is that, again, what I'm trying to say earlier is that they want it diplomatically. They want it to happen where that part of Ukraine that's sitting there and they're fed up or whatever, then they secede and get absorbed into Russia. Not Russia comes in, sets up a mine layer over the entire situation, and then sits there and says, nope, this is ours now. They just don't want it to be conquered. They want them to sit there and do it democratically. Which
then the CIA shouldn't have initiated a coup that put in a pro-U.S. government that then initiated the persecution of the Russians in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not saying it. I'm telling you what people are upset about. That's what I'm telling you. I was like, it's the fact that it's not done democratically. That's the reason why they're upset. They're sitting there and they're saying, you can't go in and conquer, because the United States hasn't conquered in that way. Like, we didn't go into Mexico and we didn't go into Canada and just say, this territory's ours now. We sit there and we respect borders, and nobody's seeing this, but I'm putting quotations around this because, yes, we do things in a much different way than currently how Russia is doing things. And so, yeah,
we literally took California, New Mexico, and Arizona away from Mexico in a war.
No, yeah, I know that. No, but the perspective is we're past that. We don't do that.
We literally took the Philippines away from Spain in a ridiculously manufactured war.
No, I know. But I'm telling you that we're no longer conquerors anymore. People believe that right now in the way that the world works now is that that you can't be a conqueror anymore. We're not. Nobody can be Napoleon and go out there and sit there and say, this is my territory now.
Well, then those people are ignorant. It happens on a yearly basis. It just happens in corners of the world we don't care about.
Well, I'm telling you that's what the world believes. That's what westernized culture, that's what the American education system has taught children, is that the conquering ended in World War II. I was like, the United States tried to conquer several places and they were unsuccessful, because guess what? That doesn't ever work out. So, and we find that out is that actually, I mean, not unless you are a really repressive government. I was like, if you try to give them rights, then they'll rise up against you. Ask the UK.
Yeah, I think our sense of freedom's also a bit idealistic. Most people will put up with a lot of most people just want safety and the trains to run on time, and they'll put up with a lot of freedoms being taken away.
Oh, for sure.
Which is why China's the way it is, because they're like, we don't care. Trains run on time. I get 3 square meals a day. I get a relatively modern standard of living, whatever. I won't say whatever I need to and keep my social credit score on the interwebs, I'm fine.
I got to be 100% honest with you. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Like, that's not a problem.
It's here in the United States. We did it during COVID. We were literally told to shut up and lock up for 3 weeks, and everyone's like, okay. Because that one was because we were scared to death. But I mean, I would have never, if you told me that 2 years before there was going to be like this pandemic and like told me like how bad it was going to be and everything, I still would have been like, yeah, no. People are going to be like, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. Florida man's going to be like, fuck off. And we didn't.
The older I get, the more I'm just like, yeah, really, actually, everything that happens on that big stage or whatever. I was like, the things that piss me off are when they do shit like what they've been doing with foreign policy. That's when I get pissed off. That's when I'm like, why are you creating problems? Like, that's what it felt like happened last week.
Lindsey Graham let the cat out of the bag over the weekend. Lindsey Graham, to his credit, that gay motherfucker just straight out said, yeah, the reason why we're in Ukraine is because it's got the most minerals, all the most important minerals in the world, and we want it in our possession, not the Russians. And I was like, that is a repugnant statement as far as I'm concerned, but at least you're being honest about it.
Yeah, it's fucking annoying. Whatever. I don't have any. They're just being annoying. Like I'm just like, dude, why? Like
So you brought up World War II. I'm glad you did.
Did I bring up World War II? I thought you did.
You did. No, you did. It
was a trap all along. I got it. It's a trap.
There's two lessons. There's two great lessons from the 20th century. There's World War II and World War I. And
I was bringing up World War II because you brought it up last week, so it was really you.
And maybe I said this last week and I don't remember. I am increasingly concerned. The people who blundered into World War I didn't mean to blunder into World War I. It was.
You did say this last week.
Okay.
No, but I'm saying I don't mind you reinforcing it where it's like, I completely agree. Whatever that British like fucking Air Force officer said this week, I was like, dude, shut your fucking mouth.
Oh, yeah, that guy was nuts.
Yeah, I was like, dude, what? Oh my gosh, shut up.
Well, and it reminded me of a William Yeats poem that he wrote after World War I. He's got a great line in the poem. And he says, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And I just feel like that's where we're at right now in terms of foreign policy. And we just have all these morons with all this passion and intensity, and they never really, other than Graham coming out and saying, "No, it's a battle for minerals." It's always just like, "Whoa, we got to stop Russia." Russia from doing what? Well, we just got to stop them. They're our enemy. Why are they our enemy?
They're our enemy because they're encroaching on people's civil rights. They are going into this area, and they are forcing them to be a part of their country. Again, that's what I'm saying. It's an issue with conquering. That's at least what if you were to, I bet you.
This is why I don't like judging people by their intentions and judging them like our actions. We were no different going into Iraq. We didn't make Iraq any better.
Well, I'm well aware. Again, I'm with you. I'm just saying that if you were to poll Americans, I think that's the problem that they have with it. Is they're just like,
well, I would say based on the election, I think I would say I wouldn't say that there's a majority, but a healthy plurality is over Ukraine, and like, whatever I've been told this is important, I don't believe it's important anymore. At the very least, it's a waste of. I think at the very least, a good 35% of the country thinks it's a waste of money and it should be spent here. I don't know that it should be looked at that way, but
well, again, and here's the thing, and I mean, we look at parallels to World War II because that's what we have.
Well, we also have World War I. And we have the Spanish
I know.
American War.
I know. I'm just saying. I was like, the World War II one is just easy hanging fruit. So that's what I'm going for here. I'm just saying is that you have the situation with when Germany rolls into Austria and they roll out the red carpet for the Germans. They're like, hooray! And yet every Jew in the fucking country is like, fuck. And they were fucked. Killed. Like,
right.
You know? And so it's like, so people are sitting there, and remember, that's what we're taught in history class. And so, again, we started this podcast by talking about how impressionable children are, and then they go and they take that out there
I
with
know,
them to what it is that we're saying.
Time and time again, the ill-begotten, always ignored white people in Armenia just continue to be forgotten because they get swallowed up in the same year, and everyone's like, "Oh well, shit happens."
Well, yeah, it's just not in the history book. There wasn't an Armenian who was funding the textbook company.
No, it's because Armenia doesn't have any key minerals.
No, it's because the Jews own all the property in America, and they freaking paid for that.
Well,
those textbooks.
the Jews in Israel did help support the Azerbaijanis moving into Armenia. Well, I always loved bringing that up. When I brought that up at Kauai, that was like uncomfortable. Like, really? That happened? Yes,
I'm just like,
that happened.
do we not? I mean, hopefully now you, let's be self-reflective on it. Why is it that the Holocaust and World War II are such a huge priority in the United States education system?
It's because we won.
No,
it's because we won.
You think it's just because we
I
won?
think it's largely. I think if we're really being honest, it's because we won.
That 7th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade all have literature pieces that all have to do with the Holocaust, not World War II.
And I think if World War II had ended in the same way World War I had, we would find a way to inconveniently ignore the Holocaust.
You don't think that Jewish pocketbooks have had an influence on that at all?
Oh, I'm sure they have.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at here.
Oh, you're getting at the Jewish lobby.
I am.
Wow, this podcast just took a turn for a little. Dun dun dun.
I'm not saying it's a problem, nor am I saying it's.
I know you're not. I
was like, if anybody's listening to this and feeling like that's unfair, I think it's a great lesson to be.
I'm
teaching
actually
kids.
glad. I'm glad.
But if you're sitting there and saying like, why don't we go over the Armenian genocide? And I'm like, Tim, you know why we don't go over the Armenian genocide.
There's enough Armenians in Los Angeles. You'd think by now.
No, just Los Angeles. Sorry, I was like, there's not like, yeah, you're right. You know why? Like we all know.
Okay,
why.
that's fine, but you're still proving my point. I'm tired of the moral theater.
Yeah, but but what I'm saying is that there's this. So if that's the side that people are constantly having to look at things from, then again, that's how they're always going to look at. And again, that's what I'm saying is that there has been such a huge push for us to not replicate that ever again. How many times have I fucking heard it? How many times have I heard teachers yell it that if we don't learn about our history, then we're doomed to repeat it? But you're sitting there and saying like that, and you could possibly sit there and say, I'm not saying that you're saying this, is that you could sit there and say, okay, well, what about the Armenian genocide? What about you're not learning about those things, and it's like,
no, my problem with our friend Roke likes to use that one too. My problem with that axiom is it's a lazy axiom, and there's other axioms that also apply, which is those who are fixated on the last war are doomed to lose the next war. That is just as equal history. And again, you're also proving my point of what history are we learning from when we learn from history? Because we're on the same page, but You're making my point. We are fixated on this one thing in the 20th century, whereas we should be focused on at least two things in the 20th century. But because we didn't really live through the horror of World War I, we ignore it. World War I was in some ways was the worst for the United States because it's like we were like what's his name? There's a funny, not Alpha Dog or something like we're like the superhero who comes in and like shows up when everyone else has cleaned house. Everyone had already been chewed up and spit out by the time Pershing shows up with his and Wilson show up, and then yes, we did lose a significant amount of men once we got there. Bella Wood, other battles in France. But again, the war ends in a stalemate, and it just gets ignored.
Well, that's the reason
and
why
we didn't live nearly what the Brits and the Italians and the Germans and the French and the Russians lived through.
Yeah, but the reason why it's forgotten is because, and here's also to the United States education system, the reason why it's forgotten is because warfare changed in World War II, and so therefore it wasn't as miserable.
That's fine from military history, but it's not from an historical perspective.
Yeah, I know, but I'm telling you,
I've read 20 books on how World War I started, and none of them all agree. That should tell you we should still keep thinking about it, and if anything, that should be more important than World War II, which is basically like a maniac. That I think if we're all honest, there was nothing that was going to stop Hitler from doing what he's going to do. But we have this idea of if Britain had just intervened sooner, it would have stopped Germany. No, it wouldn't have. The French said the French and the Brits said, you go into Poland, that's it. He went into Poland. They went in there and tried to stop him, and they got steamrolled. The British got kicked off the continent. And the vaunted French army that was supposed to stop the French army that was supposed to stop the Germans got wiped out, and Paris got rolled up in a week.
So now let's make the parallels to Putin with what it is that you're saying about World War II, not World War I, World War II. So you're sitting there and saying that, okay, so we now sit there and we say, okay, you have that part of Ukraine, and that's it. You take Western Ukraine, which is loyal to Eastern or Western Europe to an extent, and then he goes, I do what I want, and he goes and he takes it. So then what do we do? Do we then go and attack him? Like, again, do you go and stop Hitler, or?
No, because not everybody's Hitler.
Okay, so he goes through Western Ukraine and he takes it by force, the same way that he took Eastern Ukraine by force, and so he's like, all right, I'm coming after another country. Do we let him take it?
Did he ever say he was going to go take another country?
Did he ever say he was going to take Ukraine back in 2000?
No, but you don't. But again, you are proving my point. We are now turning everyone into fucking Adolf Hitler. And if that is the lesson you're learning, then that is a moronic lesson. Plenty of countries, more countries than not, take one part of a country. We rarely see Hitler or a Napoleon.
Well, okay.
And I see nothing. And here's the other thing. The same people who I'm not saying you, the same people who make this statement, who say, oh, yeah, we got to really worry we got to stop Putin. They were the same people who mocked Putin a week into his invasion of Ukraine and said, oh, this guy's a piker. He's got no army. He can't do anything. Which is it, folks? Which is it? Is this a guy who's about to roll up onto Warsaw? Or is it a guy who's just interested in taking back Ukraine?
Yeah, but
Putin's not a complicated dude, man. He wants Russia back. He wants the Soviet Union back. Poland was not a part of the Soviet Union. Okay. He wants Russian. Frankly, every single Russian leader is that includes the opposition people that we have funded that we say are pro-Western. They're not. The guy that he had murdered or supposedly had murdered in a prison a year ago, that guy was very adamantly like, I want all of Russian-speaking former republics back in Russia. They're all that way. That is the Russians want Russia back. So if part of Georgia is Russian, they want that back. If they want the Russian part of Georgia back, Ukraine back, they want that back. They're very clear about it. They have no intention of rolling into fucking Lithuania.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, but if so, again, it's all the if factor. So if, because it's all hypothetical at this point. And again, what we were talking about with Hitler, right? Because Hitler was like, I won't, and then he did. If he, I was like, if he does that, then people get to sit there and say, I told you so, right? That's the whole bit. That's the whole, we should have fucking stopped him when he was back all the way the fuck over here, and now it's a fucking problem. He's over there, and I was like, now he's got fucking China involved, blah, 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 blah. It's the whole, like, domino effect. It's the same thing. Like, and that's where people are afraid. I was like, American rhetoric has made people afraid. People are afraid of Russia. Right now.
Yeah.
Again, 15 years or 10 years ago, their biggest concern was fucking China. And right now, everybody's talking about China's having to, like, figure out Trump economics. Can they weather another Trump presidency? Because Trump might cripple them enough to where they drop down on their GDP low enough to where they're not able to.
Look, I'm fine having a conversation with being afraid with Putin. The problem is we don't want to have a conversation why we've made Putin paranoid. That's then like, oh, no. Now you're talking about conspiracy theory. Putin has every reason to feel... Putin has more of a reason to be threatened by us than the other way around. We've created this problem, and we don't want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, but I think, again, going back to... I think the reason why people are upset, or why he's paranoid, or...
No, it's because... you can finish that sentence, but I'm going to tell you right now, whatever that sentence is. We have fucking lied to Russia for 30 years.
Sure, but the American people don't know that. So.
Then they should. Then don't fund fucking wars where an entire generation of young men in Ukraine are getting chewed up for a lie. You sit down and you tell Gorbachev, we are going to help you break up the Soviet Union into all these little satellite countries, and Russia's just going to become the Russian Federation, and we promise to never expand NATO. And what do we do 5 years later? We expand NATO. And then we tell Putin, I don't know, we're done. We'll never put Ukraine, the crown jewel, into NATO. And then what does Biden do when he comes in? We're gonna put him in. And yet Putin's the bad guy.
Yeah, but Biden's fucking dumb. I don't know,
But we voted for him. We're responsible for that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I got to deal with his decisions, right? That's also the whole thing where it's like...
Then the thing that's been put back in my face is, well, none of those are treaties. Well, not everything is decided between countries.
But Ukraine's still not a part of NATO, right? They're still not sanctioned as NATO.
No, but it's still being flirted with. I mean, that was being discussed as maybe ramrodding that through also before Trump.
That's a whole like rattling of sabers right there. I was like, as much as Putin's doing it, that's doing the same thing back, where you're just like, all right, we might sign Ukraine into NATO, so you better not touch them. That whole kind of thing. And I was like, if you were serious about doing it, then you would have done it way back when. Which honestly, also the same thing. I feel the same way towards Ukraine. If you wanted NATO's protection, you should have joined way back when.
Well, look, every single American ambassador to Russia dating back to 1990 has always reported back, no one in Russia will allow Ukraine to be put into NATO. Again, not just Putin, not just Boris Yeltsin, but all of the other opposition people that we call freedom lovers and Putin opposition leaders. Every single one of them has said that is a no-go because you're putting NATO on their border.
Yeah, and I get that. I don't mind that either. Like I didn't want Ukraine a part of NATO. Like that's not what I wanted. I was like, it's just funny that Ukraine wants NATO's protection, where it's like you knew that was never an option. So I don't know.
Well, they did, but that's the thing. They never did until we initiated a coup and put in people who did want it.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not okay.
We have manufactured this mess, and it really angers me.
That's fine. I don't like the Cold War CIA bullshit around the world. Like that was, I hope, I don't know if we are, past a lot of that shit where we're like, yeah, I know.
We're still doing it. As of this moment, some CIA motherfuckers causing mischief somewhere in the world without anybody's approval.
Where was the CIA agent that was under arrest? Was he in this last week? He was the one that leaked the information about the
Oh yeah, there was a dude. He got arrested in like
Thailand.
Thailand or Burma. Yeah,
Yeah.
he leaked the Israel stuff.
Yeah, leaked the Israel stuff. I was like, damn.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on that. Like with Snowden, he's still not liked by a lot of people on the right because he broke the law and he shouldn't have leaked secrets. And my whole thing is, if you look how whistleblowers have been treated the last 5 or 6 years in the government, I would argue the government's not following the law on whistleblowers. So I think if he had come forward as a whistleblower, it would have just been brushed under the rug. And I think it's more important to know the dirty shit our government's doing than following the law, if I'm being completely honest.
The hard part...
What's more important in my hierarchy of values and principles is finding out that the government's breaking the law and lying to us and saying, we're not actually spying on you, but they are.
The hard part about that one was I don't like it when people whistleblow and it puts United States people who are... or when they do stuff like that and they release stuff and it puts people that are completely innocent bystanders at risk. That's where I like... so like...
Yeah, but I think from what I've read, a lot of that was like government. Again, that was government propaganda to make it. Oh, you put all these people, sources, and methods at risk, and I don't know that.
Oh, that wasn't that one. No. I'm talking about like, I was like, if they put out a release of where, I was like, I'm saying that if things got leaked about, like United States, like. Sorry, and I mean, like, I don't necessarily like what they're doing but if they like disclose where SEAL Team 6 was or something
yeah, no, absolutely.
and I'd be like,
no.
I was like, I would have a problem with that. And they're like, even if they're doing fucked up shit in like an area where they shouldn't be, I still would not be okay with that. Where it's like, where you've now put their lives in danger. Like, because again, those guys are just following orders. And I mean, like, as much as we can sit there and say that that's the whole thing that the Nazis got to use that entire time, I was like, I wouldn't be okay with it. But the leak was about Israeli attack on, Iran. So
yeah.
So, but anyways, back to the whole Russia situation. Yeah, I think you have a good point. And again, my point that I was saying was, I think that the nation wants it. I think that people want it done democratically. I don't think that I think the media covers it as a loss for the West or whatever. If Eastern Ukraine sits there and says, nope, we're going back to Russia and we don't want to be a part of Western Ukraine anymore. We've been ostracized. We've been set apart. We don't want to be a part of this anymore. And so we're going back to Russia, and the media will cover it. And they're like, this is a loss. And they'll sit there and promote it as being like this horrible loss to whatever. The hard part is, again, I think it's very hard for Western civilization, especially over the last couple decades, and based off of media coverage, which is important, they're not seeing, like, people don't conquer anymore. And so when they see that happen, they equate it with what they know as conquering, which is their most recent look to that is Adolf Hitler. So that's what they equate it to in their minds. Because the Cold War was a stagnant war. I was like, there was like a bunch of stuff that was happening behind the scenes, but nothing was really happening.
I think we just I think we're very good at coming up with excuses to justify what we do.
Well, again, I'm saying that's...
We could have easily gone in and stopped the ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia and kept it a country, but we very undemocratically broke it up into a bunch of other little countries.
But would you want us to?
What?
Would you want us to go into Yugoslavia and stop the ethnic cleansing?
I think the Europeans should have solved that problem. Again, this is the United States. Look, it is both true that we can't solve all the problems, but it's also true that we need to. We want to say we can't solve all the problems when it's inconvenient for us, and then say we can when it is. The Europeans, that was a European problem. The Europeans should have solved that problem.
Well, yeah, but okay, what yeah.
NATO was by definition a defensive treaty organization. It shouldn't have been offensively. And again, I bring this up as well as Putin saying like, okay, you guys are not the people you claim you are. So when you lecture me about something, I'm not listening anymore. You've gone on since the end of World War II. You've made it clear to everyone you're defensive only. We are only here to deal with the Russians rolling into Germany, and yet here you are invading Ukraine and breaking it up into a bunch of little countries. So which is it? Oh well, but we're here to stop ethnic cleansing, don't you know?
Yeah, but like I said, if there is an ethnic cleansing that we know about.
But we didn't do anything in Rwanda.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Do you want us to go in and intervene? Do we go in and intervene? That's where we have to sit there and say, are we okay with being isolationists until Pearl Harbor gets blown up, that we finally decide that we're going to step in and intervene?
No. See, you're equating two things. Ethnic cleansing is not the United States getting attacked.
No, I'm not saying that's ethnic cleansing. I'm saying there was an ethnic cleansing going on in Europe, and we said that our hands are clean of that shit until they fucking blow us the fuck up. Then we're gonna fucking...
Oh, you mean in World War II?
I just said Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but that's the Japanese.
Yeah, but that was what made us enter both.
Okay, you got to admit that was a little bit of a...
Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm saying was, again...
You're correct. No, that's the point I made, I don't know, half hour ago. We had no problem with the ethnic cleansing going on in Europe. Sure, we funded it.
Yeah, and so...
all the weapons, but we didn't get involved. But we have this idea that we're like, oh, we're going to go in there and... Look, we would have not intervened and stopped the ethnic cleansing if the Japanese hadn't attacked us.
But are we okay with that happening now? Are you okay with that happening now if it means that...
It happens now on a regular basis.
So are you okay with it happening now in the United States?
I don't lose any sleep that Azerbaijan rolled into Armenia as much as I bring it up all the time. Do you? Does anybody else?
No, I know that we don't fucking care. And I'm with you. Listen, but this is what I'm hashing this out on the podcast where I'm like, we
can't solve all the world's problems.
Let's get it out in the fucking open. Like, let's sit there and say exactly what we're trying to say. I was like, yeah, it's that Americans
people get ethnically cleansed on a regular basis and have been for a century in the Punjab province of India and Pakistan. We don't have a problem with that. We haven't done anything about the Chinese and their persecution of the Tibetans and a whole bunch of other people.
Well, I was like, but people are getting uppity right now about Palestine getting ethnically cleansed out of Gaza.
But we're not doing anything about it. Have we put boots on the ground?
Well, and according to some of our friends, is that they believe that if we let Gaza do whatever it is that they want, they're going to ethnically cleanse Israel. So, it's just like, who's going to take out who? And so it's like, okay, so at what point, so who are we intervening for?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm with you. But then also, I was like, let's take it even a step further where there's the idea of, and this is actually a book that we read in my class. I think it's a good book. It has a lot of parallels to Night when we read Night. It's about the Holocaust. And again, Holocaust is low-hanging fruit, but it makes things easier. This is a children's book, and it's called, I think it's called The Terrible Things. And the idea, and it's a children's book, And so there's a book about all these like animals that live out in the forest. And so the terrible things come with their terrible nets, and they get the birds first. I think, I don't know. They get the birds, and all the animals, and they're like, we come for the things that have feathers. And everybody's like, oh, we don't have feathers. We don't have feathers. We don't have feathers. And so they take the birds. And then they come back and they're like, we're here for all the things that swim. And they take all the things that swim or whatever. And everybody's like, oh, we don't swim. We don't swim. And it's basically that at the end, all that's left is like this rabbit that was able to hide or whatever. And it's this idea is that once everything's been taken, who's left to speak up for you is kind of the idea. Where again, and that was something that was fairly common for the Jews, and you see it in the first chapter of Night, where at first when Germany came in, it was, okay, we're just getting rid of all foreigners. Like, we're not, anybody that's not a part of this country, we're just getting rid of you. And so what they did was they took all those foreigners, and it didn't matter if you were Jews or not, which in Europe they would have called them gypsies. So all the gypsies are getting caught, are all put on a train, they all get taken off, and those ones weren't even taken to concentration camps. Those ones were all lined up in front of a ditch, and they were all shot. And so, like, it's this horrific telling. But again, it's this idea of everybody was just like, oh, okay, you're just leaving. Like, you know, they're just sending you back to where you came from. You know, and so they're just like, all right, bye. You know, and nobody cared.
Right.
Life went on to normal. They were like, oh, yeah, everything went back to normal. And even as Elie Wiesel's, the people they become accepting of what's happening as things go. And then, like, all of his neighbors get taken. His dad's, like, a part of the city council or whatever. So he's, like, one of the last people that goes on the train. And so all these people are being taken, and yet they're just like, okay. Like, oh, okay. They're just concerned about them.
Right.
And what's going on with them. And there's no problem. And so the idea is like, okay, so people then take that and they expand it to the big picture. So like with the countries where it's like, okay, if you just let, and that's the domino theory, is if you just let them do, and we just sit there and we say, no, like we can't solve the whole world's problems. We got to just focus on us, you know, then there will be nobody else because all those people are just going to sit there and force their will on whoever. So,
do you believe Israel's about to conquer Lebanon?
I think they...
No. Do you believe that they will? Do you believe that they're about to conquer Egypt?
I don't think so. I think that they will... Oh, well, I mean, the hard part is... I hope not. For a humanitarian sake, like, I have to hope for that. I have to hope from the standpoint of that's not what they're looking for. I think there's a lot of innocent people there. I think that what he's doing is horrific in Gaza. I know that what happened to them was horrific. Absolutely.
I can't make heads or tails of what's going on in Gaza. I see credible things to say a lot of what's being reported is bogus, and I see credible things to show that what is being reported that the Israelis are doing is actually happening. I can't make heads or tails out of it, which is another reason why I'm going to stay out of it. And I don't think the United States should be supporting it as much as it should be.
So you're going for Lebanon? Is that what you're wanting from me? Is you're just looking
I mean, the domino theory keeps being brought up, but I don't hear... And so this goes back to what you said a few minutes ago. We use the domino theory when we like to when we're demonizing someone, but we have no more evidence. and we God forbid we actually, you know, then we get really uppity about it when we get the domino theory thrown in front of us. If someone had said, "Oh, we're going to stop the United States in the Middle East from invading Iraq because of the domino theory," we would have said, "Oh, how dare you?" When that's literally what was being discussed. That was literally what was being discussed with the neocons. We're going to start in Afghanistan, then we're going to roll up Iraq, and then we're going to be so fucking great at that. We're going to roll up fucking Syria and Iran, and we're going to turn the whole place And that was all. Oh, this was so wonderful and great and awesome because girls are going to be able to go to. We're going to kill 1 million people, but you know what? Girls will be able to go to school. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah. So
again, domino theory always gets brought up when it's our enemies, but not when it's convenient. It's like, oh, that's kooky talk. Like I asked you the rhetorical question. I think if I asked 100 people. 100 people would say, no, there's no way Israel's going to go into Egypt and Lebanon. Well, why not? They invaded one. Why wouldn't they do it the other, just like Hitler did? They want to create a zone. There's Jews in Lebanon. There's Jews in Egypt that they want to protect. Why wouldn't they just roll up the whole thing? Oh, no, that's crazy. But Putin, yeah, sure. He wants to goose step his way into Berlin. That's fucking nonsense.
So my pushback on that is I think it's doable. I think it's possible. I was like
They could roll up into Lebanon, but Egypt it'd start a regional war.
Oh wait. You're going after Israel first.
You mean Putin? Putin roll into Germany?
No, wait. Okay, we're getting into the... hold on. We're talking about the domino theory. So again, I'm actually not saying that... I'm not saying that the domino theory is a good excuse. I'm still saying that it's the idea that like, as this happens, then another thing happens, and then this falls, and then this falls, and then this falls, and then this falls. And things kind of spiral into this bigger thing. So again, it's this idea that if we don't sit up there and we don't take over things, then... this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. I do think that the United States failed in their version of the domino theory, where they tried to create their own domino theory, where it's like, okay, we're going to spread democracy to the rest of the world, which we have tried. So yes, we have done. And so that's what I was trying to respond to, was the idea of that democracy was going to be this contagious thing that was going to spread like wildfire across the world. And also, I'm not dumb to sit there and, like, if you're sitting there and telling me that Russia and China is true communism, then you're a fucking dumbass. Like, I don't believe that at all. And so this idea of communism isn't really like Marxist communism. And so therefore you have to sit there and say, okay, well then you actually have these authoritarian governments, which have lots of structure, lots of laws, lots of stuff that's in place for them. And so therefore, I do think that when it comes to the domino theory, as far as I do think it is easier to put that into place than it is to put a democracy into place. Because again, it comes down to what the people want in a democracy. The people may not want what the fuck you just gave them. I was like, and that's, I mean, it's a trial and error process. I was like, and yeah, like people talk about how good the Constitution is. The Constitution is really good from the standpoint of like, it's not super easy to get shit changed. You can't have a democracy that has shit change all the time, or else you turn out to be fucking France. So,
right.
Which is a joke of a fucking government. So, again, I do think that when it comes to, so if we're sitting there and we're saying like, oh, you know, that's, I was like, yeah, I do see, and again, I'm putting quotes around communism. I do see that, I do think it is easier for Russia and China to just go into a place and just say, nope, this is what's now in place. You have to follow these rules and stuff. And because, again, what you kind of talked about, where it's like people just want the trains to run on time, have some sort of social whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's easier to fit into that role than it is to now all of a sudden have all this fucking freedom out of nowhere and be able to make a decision. And people are like, I like it the way it was. I liked it. I would like for it to be different, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not opposed to anybody that sits there and says that for their argument. When it comes to the domino theory, yeah, I don't think that. I think it's a failed experiment on the United States part. Like, and I'm sure you have a better understanding of U.S. history where you can tell me about what countries have become democracies since World War II, and we might have spread democracy around the world, and it's been successful there. But I was like, again, kind of what we've talked about in the United States education system is that they've taught me that, and I'm not a history major, so I don't know any of these things, nor am I like an armchair history buff. Apparently, that's onset republicanism. So if you become a real big World War II history buff, then that's early onset republicanism. That's not my joke. That's a comedian's. But
Civil War too.
yeah, Civil War. Yeah, you're just like, man, I just got to itch to scratch to watch that Ken Burns Civil War documentary.
Used to watch it regularly. Haven't watched it in a while.
The idea behind that may have happened. I don't think it's healthy. I agree with you on pretty much everything. I played devil's advocate
I know.
for a lot of our conversation tonight. But, I think that there's a lot of things that... Actually, I think my issue is there's a lot of things that people that may be listening to this where you're an American and you're hearing this, know that Americans 100 years ago were not having to deal with these problems, where you are having to make those decisions. That's not what you were thinking about voting for when you were voting. That's not what you went into the voter's box to vote for. You were thinking about things that were domestic, not foreign. And maybe,
largely, although again, we stayed out of World War One because we had enough public polling back there to know that the people who voted in Woodrow Wilson had no predilection approval to go send Americans into Europe.
yeah, and I mean, but that was also in a world where, like, you know,
And the same in World War II. The polling was very clear all the way up until Japan. The United States, America had no desire, because we were fixated on getting out of the Depression, and we had already fought in World War I. I think that generation, even though we didn't experience in the same way the European generation did, we still did have a remembrance of how bad World War I was, and we're like, we already got entangled in one of these, we're not getting entangled into another.
But also, what I will say about World War I is it was much, much easier for us to sit there and say, again, to the credit of the World War I song, over there, is that the war is over there from the standpoint of, if you wanted to get troops from the United States to over there, it was going to be a boat trip for a couple of days to get people over there.
Yeah, but it still wasn't World War II, though. I mean, we weren't flying troops over. We were
Oh,
sitting
yeah,
over on
100%.
boats.
Well, and I fully agree. That's
Right.
what I'm sitting there. I'm saying that World War II, similar situation where it's like it was so much easier for 100 years ago for you to sit there and say that's somebody else's problem.
Right, okay.
With
yeah.
how interconnected we are now, where you can be on a plane to anywhere in the fucking world within, 18 hours max.
Right.
I was like, our world has become something so much more, and where all the economies are intertwined and all that kind of stuff. That's where I was like, I almost kind of call bluff on when people talk about the whole like nuclear shit. Is like, I don't think you understand how much, even if one of them got it off, and like how everybody would be in turmoil because of how much. That's why it's like it's gonna happen to a country that. Like, if you think that Russia's going to just completely nuke the United States if you think that that's going to happen and the United States and we fire off our nukes or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I was like, we either cease to exist or one country goes into absolute turmoil for forever and they have to redefine what the world looks like at that point. I was like, because it's...
Well, I think that's why World War I's a better analogy. I don't think the threat from Putin or Ukraine is that someone's going to nuke Moscow or nuke Washington. I think Putin would set off a tactical battlefield nuke somewhere in central or eastern Ukraine, and then dare NATO to actually do something. And I think, despite all the bluster, I do think. When he does that, I think there are a lot of people in the West who go like, oh, fuck, do we really want to get into this over Ukraine, or do we really want to go over the World War I precipice over this? And then, and I do believe that, because I think this election, I think the election in Germany where you had the right wing government win, there have been the Polish government that was very pro Ukraine war has been voted out. There are the French government has been voted out, although Macron's refusing to leave. He's violating the Constitution and refusing to leave.
Yeah, this fucking
You were
France. We already
seeing
established
all
that's a
over
shitty
Europe and in the United States people saying like, I don't care. We have NATO. We have and this is my whole thing. We have a treaty. We have the countries we've decided. So if Putin wants to invade Ukraine and then one day decide invade Poland, then we have a war in our hands. There's nothing we could have done about it. But you don't get to say, oh, well, Ukraine's technically not part of our treaty alliance, but we're not going to make it the thing we're going to go to war with.
Oh, 100. I
think that's
agree.
That's what we've done. We've proven Putin's point by saying, oh, well, even though they're not part of it, you've invaded it, and so we're now going to make it like a de facto part of NATO. And it's like, no, that has been part of Russia off and on for 400, 500, 600 years.
Well, and if you sit there and say that, okay, like, again, if you're sitting there, again, I'm not a huge fan of the conquering element, but I'm still sitting there and saying that if you think that all of a sudden he's just going to start oppressing these, you're sitting there and saying he's got this oppressive government and we want the least amount of people under that oppressive government as possible, then why the fuck didn't you care about him being over Russia all this fucking time? Like, I was like,
right.
Then at that idea, I was like, it's like Superman sitting there and letting Lex Luthor just be in his house, like knowing that he's committed all the crimes and all this shit, and you're just like, oh, he escaped from prison, and I know where he's at, but I'm just not gonna go get him. And you're like, is that an ethical dilemma?
Right. Well,
I don't know. So
let's get one more beer and let's wrap this up.
Okay.
I think we can chug a 12er in 5 minutes. 15.
I mean, I don't
5
gotta,
minutes.
I don't
5
gotta,
minutes.
I don't gotta finish it on podcast unless you're trying to get to bed like ASAP.
I was like, we talk about something. What am I talking about?
Elevate your space with Jollywood Live Edge custom furniture and discover the art of craftsmanship. At Jollywood, we transform your vision into reality with our exquisite custom furniture and woodworking. We source only the finest woods and materials, ensuring durability and elegance in every creation. Our commitment to the highest quality and exceptional service ensures that every piece we create is not just furniture, but a masterpiece. Experience the perfect harmony of beauty and functionality designed just for you. Call us at 559-553-2010 or visit us on Instagram at Jollywood Official to start your journey today. Jollywood Live Edge Custom Furniture. Crafting quality, creating legacy.
I've been wailing and gnashing my teeth for West Coast IPA for months. I'm sure everyone on the podcast is tired of hearing about it, so here we go.
We'll give them what they want.
This is the first time I've had it out of a
Okay,
can.
all right. Wow, is yours not shaking up? Did
No. Oh, yeah, it is.
you? Okay.
Did
you just throw these in the back of the car on the way back?
They've been in the fridge for days, completely settled. I don't know what happened. Maybe trying to get them out of the 12-pack.
So I did want to
I
make
think
this
this is the
point.
first time I've had this out of a can.
Yeah, I agree.
They had them in the bottles, and I thought, I haven't had a can. I'll get the can instead. Anyway.
We're having Race 5, by the way. We've also had this on the show. We don't got to say much more about it. It's a pinnacle West Coast IPA. But I did want to say this. So when I was getting at when I said there's like 100 years ago, a lot of people didn't have to vote for this kind of... This wasn't as high on the priority list, I should say. Well, and I mean, maybe. I was like, you had World War I, you had World War II, and so that might have been at the forefront. But again, it's this idea of something where mass media, mass consumption of media was not what it is today, where you feel I do feel like there is a pressure where if it was World War I, if it was World War II, those types of things could happen. Those decisions could be weeks. You're looking at this kind of stuff could be minutes, right? And you can feel that pressure, and like if we went to war, like let's say with Russia right now, okay, we would have people on the ground within hours.
Yeah, but yes. So far, you're correct, but you're also wrong.
And so what I'm trying to say, and maybe this will help steer where I'm talking to where maybe you'll feel that I'm less wrong, is the idea of, I still believe that as the United States citizens, our responsibility is towards what we have locally, because those are the things that we can control. I know that we believe that our vote matters so much and all that kind of stuff, and we add so much power to all that kind of stuff, and I get that. Go into the voter's box, do that power that you feel like you need to hold. But ultimately, at the end of the day, please do not lose sight of your responsibility towards you and your neighbors, and making sure that you are, again, what we talked about last week, you are that restorative person that is able to help through that. I was like, we've got a situation right here at home, and we haven't really talked about it politically. I was like, I think we kind of mentioned it, but we haven't really like dove into it. Where we're talking about illegal immigrants in our country. And so what do we do with that? Those are going to be people that, for us in our area, those are going to be some of our neighbors. I was like, I've got students whose parents are illegal immigrants. And so what do we do about that situation? And you know, I'm torn. Yes, I understand that they're breaking the law. But I also see good, hardworking people that haven't done anything wrong, who have kids that are here, and I understand what taking them away from their children would do and that kind of stuff. And I think that that's a really difficult thing to navigate, and I don't know what the solution is, but yet I think that it's more important for us to rally around that and solve that problem than it is to solve the fucking Ukraine-Russia problem that's happening thousands of miles away, and that really isn't.
You are echoing, I think, the biggest reason. You are echoing what got Trump elected.
But is that not what we've been saying this whole time? Where we said that, where we were talking about the fact where it's like, that's not our problem. Let's talk about what is our problem, right? Like that's, and it's not sitting there. Agree. Because I kept saying, we were talking and we were like,
let's keep going with that. Let me insert my where you're wrong 100 years ago. You're correct in the terms of we're not getting instant information. The difference 100 years ago was when Italy and Germany and France and the UK, including Ireland at the time, are involved in a war.
How dare you?
People here in the United States are recent immigrants, and they have family over there that are getting involved in that war, and so they have an interest in whether or not how that war is going. So that'd be my only pushback. Whereas now, very few people are like, "Oh, I got family in Italy, and so they're part of this war." So that would be my only thing. Yes, the immigration issue and other domestic issues. I think are what people are having to figure out. I think, or not figure out. That is what people are wanting more focus on. I think RFK has ripped off that's the wrong analogy. I was going to say ripped off a Band-Aid. I think he's opened up a can of worms that a lot of people were already thinking and feeling about the food. I'm already hearing apparently a lot of scientists are coming forward and saying we've been wanting to have this conversation about our food supply for a long time, but we've been told to shut up. And so the immigration thing is difficult. I think also, though,
I don't have a solution for you. Like I said earlier.
well, I don't look. Trump tamped down the border without doing draconian. One's got to bake it into a cake that Trump talks a big game and doesn't live up to that game. And I think part of that is having read The Art of the Deal. That's Art of the Deal nonsense. I think it's also just he's prone to bluster. And in a lot of cases that results in supporters of him being disappointed. I'm not going to be disappointed on the immigration front in terms of deportations. I do want the border secure. He was much better at securing the border. I think when it comes to deporting, one of the misconceptions is that there's always this, and it's because the media, and I would hate to say it if you're a Democrat, you got to admit it. There's this idea that it's just this constant stream, like Mexicans are having, like, popping babies out all the time. It's just Mexicans coming across, and a lot of the folks that have come across in the last couple of years aren't Mexicans, and they're not even Central Americans. They're South Americans. There's a lot of Venezuelans.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem, well, it's been reported. It's not like it's a pandemic of sorts, or a bad term after COVID, but it's not like every city they're setting up gangs, but it's been widely reported in Denver and Dallas and Houston and other cities. Venezuelan gangs have come over, they've taken over like entire apartment buildings, and they're running criminal operations. And it's also Trump was not incorrect the first time he ran when he pointed out all of the Central American gangs that were coming in that had been allowed in under the Obama administration, which, by the way, the CIA created when they were trying to fight fucking communists. Again, we always create these problems and end up boomeranging back on us. We never learned them. And what's not widely reported is a lot of the people who've come across in the last couple years, I have no idea if the government has an inkling or not, but it's been reported by people at the border and at this thing, the something gap in Panama, where a lot of people are coming to and then making their way up Central America.
That's just the Panama Canal.
No, there's a gap between, I think, Costa Rica and Panama. Something gap. Anyway, the Chinese are allowing a lot of male Chinese to illegally immigrate. And there could be different reasons for that. It's because their male to female ratio is way out of whack, and they know that a society can't exist if you got sexually frustrated men. I'm laughing, but it's also not true. It's also true. You cannot create a situation where you have a huge amount of sexually frustrated males to females and keep your society going to go. It'll be a powder keg. I'm sorry. So it might be that. It might be they're sending over foreign agents or whatever. I think you start with those. You start with Chinese who have no business immigrating here. I'm sorry. I know you're in a repressive regime, but you're at the back of the line. There's no reason for you to be here. Send the people back from Venezuela. I think a lot of that can be done. Let's not talk about splitting up families. Now, what we don't want to talk about is a lot of these quote-unquote families that are coming across the border are bogus. They're not families. There are people coming over with people claiming them that they're children, and they're either the children of other people who aren't here yet, or they're sex workers.
Yeah. Well, and here's something that I kind of want also as well is where, just in the same way that I can't control, I don't know, I get that it's the United States, but we also have a really bad habit in the United States of focusing on things in places that we still can't control. Our vote does have more control over those things than, like, let's say Ukraine and Russia, but also I think that there is some merit in sitting there and saying that I can't control, nor do I care, and nor does the rest of the country care, and that's been evident for years, about what's going on in fucking Chicago.
You're not wrong. I'm laughing, but you're not wrong.
I was like, nobody gave a damn about what. I was like, you gave a damn about the Rodney King riots. You fucking lived it. Like, you were there. I was like, nobody else in the country fucking cared. I was like, they cared on the media. Like, they made
Right.
people care or whatever. And people got to say, oh, we were a part of that, blah, blah, blah. But really, how much did it actually matter to you? It didn't really fucking matter. So what we can do is focus on the things that are around us. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm not discrediting what you're saying about what's going on in the United States. And when you're voting for a president, you got to go for those things. But I got to view, again, my mission is never about who's the president. It's about what can I do with whoever is the president to make sure, again, I'm being restorative in my community. And so right now, what I'm looking at is we don't have Venezuelan gangs that are running our territories. We do have gangs that are running our territories, or our areas, but it's not prominent. What we deal with in the Central Valley for gangs is nowhere near to what goes on in, like, I can't sit there and say, like, what we experience for gangs here is equivalent to what's going on in, like, Chicago or New Orleans or, like, I can't sit there and say that. We do have gang problems here. They're not as, like,
I don't know about that. I think we have some pretty vicious gangs because they're running the marijuana trade, which is California basically now provides marijuana for the rest of the country.
yeah, they are running,
And the cartels are growing it.
yeah. But in our, like, what I'm saying is our area in particular, it's not like
I understand what you're saying.
like non-gang affiliated people getting shot or getting abducted or whatever in our area is not as common in others. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
No,
I'm
yeah.
just saying it's not.
Yeah,
as
we had one last year where, like, a girl got or a woman got decapitated, but that doesn't happen. That rarely happens, which is why the area and our sheriff was shocked by it.
right. I was like, it's
which
not,
he also then used to be like, yeah, we're seeing this more and more. I don't know if that's the case or not, but
yeah, it's not super common in our area. Again, they are prominent. Like, I'm not sitting there, like, I work at a high school. I know what colors and what gangs people are affiliated with and that kind of stuff. And like that's on the radar.
So are you saying immigration we should just sit back and let the federal government deal with it and then just, like, judge it based on what area we live in?
No. What I was trying to get at is I do know what I have at my disposal. And what I do have is I do have some teenagers that are very based off of the rhetoric that they've heard recently, and they know that their parents are illegal. They are afraid that their parents are going to be taken away from them.
Okay, this is a good. Let's end it on this topic.
Yeah.
Which, if you're listening, might mean we're talking for another 45 minutes. So no, don't take that. I'm glad you brought this up
We got
because
2 more beers in us for this.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was listening to Greg Boyd today,
Oh, nice.
and he did a post-election podcast a couple days after, and I had sat on it. He normally does these little. He has a quote-unquote podcast, but they're usually like, I mean, they can be 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was like,
They can be 2 minutes. They probably average 4. It's usually him and a friend of his answer a question that gets sent in by a listener. But this one was closer to 15, and it was them sharing their thoughts on the election.
I was like, Greg can be long-winded, so I don't know how many times he's had to, like, remind himself that he's like, I gotta keep that, like, to 2 minutes or whatever. So
his thing was, he was very clear. His guy didn't win. He's not a Trump fan, but he also wasn't like.
Did he clarify that he voted? So for the first time ever in 2020, he voted. He actually got up in front of the congregation and he said, "Hey, this is going to be a big vote."
I don't know that he said that he voted, but he made it clear he doesn't like Trump. He doesn't support Trump.
Yeah.
But then, to your point, then he pointed out a friend of his sent something like an article that someone had said that was very much like, okay, okay, you Trump people, here's the 20 things that are now going to happen with the country. So you voted for this. You brought this upon yourselves. Don't come crying to me when this happens. And Greg was like, texted his friend back and was like, I don't know why you're sending this to me. This does not resonate with me. This is the opposite of what I'm feeling right now. I'm not at all, I'm not wailing and thinking the country's over, and I'm not thinking that the people who voted Trump in are horrible. Like, this is not the position I'm taking, nor do I think Christians should be taking. Kind of what we've have talked about in the several episodes since the election.
Right.
And he made a great point and said, I would say it's fair to say he swims in progressive Christian political circles, and talked about how, these friends of his are distraught and they can't believe where the country's going, and just said, he's not saying this to them directly, but just pointed out, the church had to live through Nero.
Yeah. It's in the book of Revelation if anybody wants to read it.
But I mean, pick up a book. I mean, trust Wikipedia is going to give you a fairly accurate view of who Nero is, or do a little bit more digging. The church lived through Nero.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're an evangelical whose main thing is abortion and gay marriage, or a progressive Christian whose main thing is illegal immigration and trans rights. We're not living through anything like Nero. And don't try to pretend that, oh no, we're not being persecuted, but we're trying to make the church better by worrying about other people. Stop. That's just you patting yourself on the back and making yourself out to be bigger than you are.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're then wanting to pick fights about it and accuse people who disagree with you of being less than you. Not just disagree, but, well, you're not a real Christian, or you're repugnant, or you're a Nazi, or you're a racist, or whatever, or you're all about compassion and you don't want to believe in God, that you don't believe God's King Jesus, and you don't believe in one man, one woman, whatever little thing you want to do to separate yourself and make you feel better and more superior as a Christian to the other. We're not living through really particularly rough times, which makes, I would say, all of this vitriol that we're dishing out on our political adversaries even worse. And then he wrapped up, which is where I'm going with this is what ties into what you're talking about. It would be, if you're a church in an area, let's say our area, because we have a lot of migrant workers that come in and out, to Colton's point, he's had kids probably every year he's taught that he knows are kids of undocumented, illegal, whatever you want to call them. Maybe you're in a big city.
I gotta be honest. I don't think I've yet to get, and I don't know if they're allowed in the public school system. I really don't know. I haven't done the research on it or anything. I don't think I've ever gotten an undocumented student. I've only ever gotten on a student. All of them have been born in the United States that I've had, as far as I've had conversations with, but their parents have come across the border illegally. If they were, not all of my students, that's not what I'm getting at, but my students that have illegal, like right now, I was like in my second period class alone, I probably have, that class is only 16 kids. I probably have 4 or 5 that are, their parents came here illegally. They're still here illegally, and they're now, that's a senior class. So those kids are 17, 18 years old.
I think it's more helpful for the church. This one's a little difficult in our area because we're conservative, although I'm going to suggest something when I'm done with this for the conservative part of the church.
Yeah.
If you're a progressive Christian, you're a progressive church. My suggestion to you, and this is what Greg was saying, so I'm echoing what he said. Rather than go out and call Trump a fascist or Hitler and call the agents who show up at people's doors, brown shirt, goose-stepping goons, keep the vitriol to yourself, or actually ask for forgiveness from Jesus and try not to think that way about people who are doing their best to govern the country or execute the laws that they've been told to execute. And if you really believe what you believe, remove the vitriol and be prepared to follow Jesus. If you think this is what he calls, be prepared to break the law, or maybe not have to go to the extent of breaking the law, coming up with ways to support people who are illegal immigrants. Create a church-driven legal fund group where you bring in lawyers who will say, I will represent you at the immigration court. I'll learn enough about immigration law and I'll support you. And to my conservative friends, step out of what you are told is, it's all about you can have, and this is where I exist. This is the world I exist in. I, on the one hand, believe in very strong borders. If I had my way, we would have very little or no immigration for about 10, 15 years because I think we've had enough people come in. It would behoove everybody, including the immigrants, legal or illegal, to have time to get to know each other. Everyone have jobs. Let the job market settle. Let people learn the language. Let all of the systems that have to cope with immigration, illegal or legal, whether it be the schools, hospitals, the DMV, whatever. That's the system I would like. That's not the system, but that doesn't mean that when I come across, and I think this is where the church needs to be very vocal. We want this, but that does not mean we're going to turn our hand or turn in the illegal immigrant. We're going to be open to those as Jesus would want us to be. It's the government. The government determines the policy, either by writing the law or implementing the law. I mean, the law we have very clear, contrary to what people say, we have very clear immigration law in the United States. It's very simple. It's not that complicated. It's just whether or not whoever is president wants to execute it. The church should say that is the world's problem. We're agnostic on that. And we don't care if you're documented or undocumented. We're going to open our arms to you. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have been established here, you have children here, and you're subject to deportation, we're going to step in as brothers and sisters and help you out.
Yeah, and I think I might have said it last week. I was like, there's very few things that, well, I'm not like, I believe in that whole, like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But I do also believe in that I do have a responsibility towards those around me to, when we talk about the idea of turn the other cheek, and you take the pack an extra mile or you give them the cloak off your back, it's very important because there's three parties that are involved in that parable or in that conversation that is happening. It's one, the victim, two, the aggressor, but then three are the people that see, or the crowd, if you will. And so you may hear a pastor talk about it where it's like, no, that's not where I was like, or you might have even heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talk about how that's how we're going to use civil disobedience to show, that we turn the other cheek and we do this. And so the shame goes on them and all that kind of stuff. But as I've always talked about, and that we always talked about in college class when we discussed it, is that the crowd has to be accepting of the fact that the shame is now on the other person. So it has to be on the Romans. It is the response of the crowd to sit there and recognize that, and then the crowd has to do something, right? The Roman soldier would only beg for his pack back if his superior officer was there or something was going on to where he's like, no, give me that back. As you might have heard, because again, the idea was that they were only allowed to carry it for a mile. They couldn't carry it for anything more. And so the Roman soldier would be asking for it back. If you were to smack somebody with the other side of your hand, then people would be upset. They'd be like, hey, now you're just beating this guy up. Like, what the hell is it that you're doing? If you took the cloak off of his back, you've now made him naked. You've now brought shame to you for taking everything from this man to where now he is naked. Because again,
you're violating Roman virtues.
Right. And so what those people are, but the key thing is that the crowd has to be there to accept it. And so in that situation where if somebody were to sit there and take my students' families away, I was like, I would protest that on the street. Like if people were like, we're going to get together, we're going to put signs up, I'd be out there. And not because I don't necessarily believe that people shouldn't be here illegally, but to where something in my soul recognizes that that's not right. I was like, my kid has done nothing, and yet you've done something. You are going to do something that is going to impact them for the rest of their life. Way worse. And I know that their parents made mistakes, but I also believe in forgiveness from those mistakes. And I'm not sitting there and saying that we just sit there and we let everybody go and we just do this whole thing. But I'm telling you that and that's where I don't necessarily believe that my situation or what it is that I'm doing should therefore be implemented across the whole of the United States, where they're like, well, if you do it for one person, then you got to do it for all of them. That's not what I'm saying.
No, you're living in a world of contradictions and paradoxes.
I think we all do.
I agree, and I think we've discussed this numerous times. Of you're talking about living in that gray, and too much. The world we live in, and I would say a lot of that is because we've created a 2,000 years of Western Christianity has kind of created this of absolutes, moral absolutes, and I think the world is a lot more, and where Christians need to be comfortable living is a world of gray and paradoxes, and if not contradiction.
I think it's so easy to become black and white when you just focus on the macro.
Exactly.
But
which is why I said
much more difficult if you focus on the micro.
I don't agree with illegal immigration, but that doesn't mean that I'm gonna spit in the face or call and look to deport or even fight someone being deported that I learned. And if you say you're being a hypocrite, fine, call me a hypocrite. I think that's me trying to live in the world I live in.
I'll take it.
And I think more Christians should be comfortable living in that and accepting it and saying, like, you know what? It's kind of, you're pushing on me about the genocides. We very easily swim in that contradiction of, should have done something in Rwanda, but we didn't do anything. We should have done something else in some other African country. Should have done something in Asia. Didn't do anything in Cambodia when Pol Pot invaded there. We create all kinds of contradictions when it comes to our foreign policy.
Yeah. And
I get upset about it. But I also understand that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
Where I get frustrated is I get frustrated with our foreign policy because we talk in absolutes. We talk as if we're more morally superior. And I would be much more accepting of it if we were like, yeah, you know what? We don't care because it's not in the United States interest. I don't care about Ukraine because it's not part of NATO. It's always been part of Russia. And at the end of the day, we don't have any stake in it. That is a big boy answer. And it would piss people off. And it might even at one point piss me off back in the day. Oh, how dare you? We're the United States. We're supposed to be blah, blah. The shiny city on the hill. No. Be honest about it. And again, all of these issues that we're having to deal with domestically, I think the church needs to learn how to, and that not just act, but talk in gray, dirty. I mean, I don't mean like immoral, but like gray zones that doesn't please anybody. Do I really think that do I think there's anything other than two genders? No. I think there's male and female. But I'm also not willing to ratchet up the language about it so much that LGBTQ people feel like they're so ostracized and there's something so wrong with them that the only thing they have left is to commit suicide.
Yeah, that'd be terrible.
Am I for 3 million 11 million immigrants coming in or 2 million? No, but they're here. They're brothers and sisters.
Yep.
So am I going to get upset about it? No. Am I going to pitch a fit because they're not learning English at the rate I will? No. If you're a church, if you're some white dude, conservative Christian who's upset because illegals aren't learning English, why don't you just shut the hell up and start a Saturday tutoring thing so they learn English instead of just complaining about it and demonizing them?
100%. Or go buy those new headphones. Nice little plug here. You can buy headphones now. They're like a little earbud that you can put in your ear, and it automatically translates Spanish for you into English or any language in the world. It can translate it. It's AI generated, so it can go. And I mean, obviously, it's not going to be flawless, so there might be some slang terms or whatever that aren't going to go. But it's pretty cool. Actually, it's really cool that technology has come that far to where you could just put an earpiece in your ear and just go and understand what people are saying. I feel like you have something you want to say.
I'm just figuring out. I'm trying to think if there's anything more.
I think yeah, it's not easy. I do wish that more people in the country. I was like, our government's going to do what our government's going to do. I can't control them. I was like, I barely think my vote counts when it comes to presidents. But my focus is what is it that I can do again in my community and what's going on around me. And how do I do what Christ has wanted for us in our community? And so that should be our focus when it comes to world politics. And again, and none of this is in scripture. Like, you can't just sit there and just be like, oh no, Jesus had ideas about what was going on and knew that the Gauls were going to sack Rome or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh. So we have to, we have to sit there and that's not the world that we live in. A lot of the things that you should be focused on. And I mean, like, I hate to say it, like, don't sit there and focus on Ukraine and Russia, but I really don't think it's healthy I was like, we're doing it. Even me, like, there's times where I've had to sit there and I've had to unplug and just be like, and I have been concerned about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Like, I'm just like, I'm getting irritated and all this kind of stuff. But really, at the end of the day, what the fuck am I going to be able to do about it?
I'm only concerned about it in terms of it becoming World War I.
Oh, 100%.
And spiraling into where everyone's like,
Well, no, I'm concerned about it
That's
on the
my
same
concern.
standpoint, but like at the same point, like, is that something that, like, is it worth, like, is that worth my time, or can I put my time into other things that are like, I can't control that, right? Like I was like, I could get up and talk in my community or whatever. I could get on, because this is what some people believe, is that you can get onto TikTok and you can sit there and you can try to convince people and say what you want to say. I could get on Twitter and I can say, I have my platform. I'll stand up and say what it is. And I was like, this is how you get your Facebook warriors, your internet warriors that are out there sitting
If
there
you
and
say that,
saying,
we're talking on a podcast. I would actually say no. I probably care more than I would because of the podcast and talking about it on here, because I hope the 70 people that listen on a weekly basis
well, and I don't.
share our thoughts, and that leads to them having a conversation with 5 or 10 other people. And
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's a cause that I believe in, but I'm saying, and I mean, that's a cause that other people believe in, and I guess that's true. You know, you're saying that on a podcast, but I think what I'm trying to get at is more of like, I'm not. Our goal when we started this podcast was for our target audience. We wanted to have a conversation with them and sit there and say, hey, we understand how you think. We were you. We're still growing. And we're hoping that you'll come out here and you'll grow with us. And you know, and I mean, that's why you've said it a couple times tonight, where it's like 2 years ago, 10 years ago, I might have thought differently. 15 years ago, I might have thought differently, or whatever. And I fully agree. 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have thought differently on particular topics. And so how do we grow? How do we become better through that? And if you want to sit there and say fuck off on all that kind of stuff, I'm not sitting there and saying, well, we can't be friends or anything like that. I'm like, all right, that's fine. I was like, this is just where I'm at. And that's what that's what I'm working through on this. And ultimately what I want to say is, if you're sitting there and you're consuming this information and you're worried about it, I think one of the things that I would say is, I'd be more concerned about what's going on in your community than focusing on something that's going on elsewhere. And this is something that I'm having to remind myself of on a regular basis, because there are times where I do get afraid, and I'm checking CNN. And I mean, like, you're like, and a lot of you are like, what the hell, you check CNN? Some of you are like, we fucking knew it. I check CNN, and I don't need to defend that. I check it in the evening before I go to bed. I check it in the morning, and there's occasionally where I'll check in at work. And I got to be honest, ever since I've ever started checking into CNN, I don't ever care about on there. I've never cared about United States politics. I've never cared about United States politics well, I mean, it is United States politics, but I'm talking about, I don't care about domestic problems on there. It's usually world problems. And so when I really started...
you should go to BBC then. BBC is by far the best world, because, I mean, they still have reporters everywhere. I was watching it when I was in San Francisco, and they were, like, reporting on something in Africa somewhere. I was like, I didn't even know that was the thing. Of course, BBC's reporting on it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, it's a country they used to own, so...
Exactly.
They're like, we got to keep tabs on the old buddies, you know, that are down there.
It was probably that country's main news source too.
Yeah. So I think so it's fine. I was like, I get it. But also there's like a part of me that sits there and it's got to check and say, I can't control, at least in the immediate sense, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And yet I have a platform in my classroom. And if you're sitting there and you're worried about teachers, are they exposing kids to this kind of stuff? And yeah, we do have conversations. I was like, we like to keep things relevant, and I don't enforce policies on my kids. I let them negotiate and talk about things. Those things are usually a more self-reflective assignments. We don't I was like, we occasionally get the chance to share, but it's not like try to convince your partner, or like we don't do debates. Debates are more like, debates are hard because kids don't know how to debate, and a lot of teachers aren't really good at being debates. I was like, I've talked about a situation where I've been in a debate before in a high school classroom setting, and my teacher didn't do very well, and I ended up telling a gay guy that he was going to go to hell. And I don't want to create that opportunity for kids to do that. And so yet I do allow kids to share their perspective, and that's always really good. And yeah, and there's perspective that people have on the Israeli Hamas situation. There's a lot of perspective that people have on the Ukraine Russian perspective, and that's more than okay. And what we're doing here is we're sharing our perspective. But if you disagree, that's not a problem. I'm not sitting here and planting my flag and sitting here and saying that this is how we have to believe and behave or whatever, and I have to do everything I can to fight for whatever XYZ. I'd rather spend that energy on the micro level than the macro level is kind of what I'm getting at. So I was like, that's my 2 cents on it.
My 2 cents are, I agree with you. I just wouldn't I'm not putting a difference between the macro and the micro. I think the what's permeated the show, and I think will always be kind of the central theme of the show, and it goes back to the Yeats quote, is the best lack all conviction, and I think so many of what I think Americans are really bad at this, and I think Americans are bad at this because we're the world superpower, and so we kind of get to dictate the terms of how the world thinks. And I think it's also because we have this very strange sort of neo-puritanical evangelical view of the world that's very unique to the United States. Our view of Christianity is very unique, and unfortunately most of us, including myself,
Extremely harmful to
including myself. I mean, I'm only recently aware of it. Don't know that we have this very unique, very modern view of Christianity, which is built on a very strange Greek influenced Christianity that is not at all what Jesus was talking about. And it's not to say that it's like bad, but we need to understand that the Christianity that we believe in is much more influenced by the Greeks than we think it is, and it's not just this like pure.
as much as Martin Luther tried.
Right. Anyway, my point of all that is, again, the best lack all conviction. Have perspectives. Even be adamant about your perspective. I got worked up an hour and a half ago about Ukraine. I can get very worked up about it. I've gotten worked up about it at the brewery to where I've had to apologize because I get very animated about it. But I think getting worked up about something and then at the end of the day saying, that's my perspective, because when you have convictions, when you have moral absolutes where you think Bad Orange Man is Hitler and all the people who follow him are Nazis, he's a Nazi, he's Hitler and they're Nazis, or you can't be a left-winger and be a Christian, that then leads to demonization and scapegoating and all the things I've talked about. And so whether it is domestic or micro or macro, foreign policy or domestic policy, have your perspectives. But don't turn them into convictions. And on a lot of things that we're even fine to be convicted on our Christianity, they're just mere perspectives of Christianity. If I was going to do a new book, add on to C.S. Lewis, just mere perspectives. Be okay with that.
Strong opinions weakly held.
Strong opinions weakly held. And be okay with those contradictory in how you think the world should be and how you actually interact in the world. Again, be for tight immigration policy, but have an open hand and kindness to illegal immigrants. Have your opinion on LGBTQ, but actually treat people differently. There's a whole host of issues that these kind of things apply to. Because when we get really convicted, when we are full of passion, full of intensity, and these things that don't need to be convictions turn into convictions, we have things like World War I. We have the Civil War in the United States, which, yes, was an important war over slavery. And should have been fought.
Important war over slavery. Do you not feel like that could have been a diplomatic?
I mean, that's the thing. I mean,
I know.
At the end of the day, I think if you're listening to this and you find that appalling, it's my perspective that I don't think, feel like it's my perspective that Jesus's view of the world is that war is that of men and not of his father. And if that offends you, whether it be to solve slavery or end a Jewish genocide, I think you're missing the point. I to take this back to where we were an hour and a half ago, I think the lesson of World War II is to not create Hitlers. It isn't to try to prevent Hitlers. And I don't think we spend a lot of time on that, because in order to do that, that means the West has the United States and Britain and France have to ask questions about what did you do to Germany after World War I that created those kinds of create the ecosystem where a Hitler could come out of there. There's been plenty of books that have said that it happened, but that is still not allowed in polite company, even in academic circles. It's just not. Why? To me, that is the essential question. How do we prevent? Let's agree that the Hitlers of the world are outliers. Are they outliers just because, I don't know, he was demonic and that's just the end of it? To which I would say, well, then there was. My view of Hitler is, one, either have a conversation on how we could have not created him, or just accept that nothing we would have done, that the British would have done, that the French would have done, even the United States would have done, would have prevented Hitler from doing what he would have done. My whole problem with the conversation is we could have prevented Hitler from doing X. And if people like that, when people like that come along, there's nothing. Rationality, morality doesn't stop them, but we want to pretend it does. So, I got us back to the previous conversation. I completely agree with you. We need to stay focused on what we can do in our community. If you're in a church, within the context of your church. If you're going to college, within the context of your college. What your family can do, wherever that is. Or just how you daily interact with people when you go out into the community. Someone looks scary, go out of your way to not actually. I don't know. Any other thoughts, Colton?
Nope. I got nothing left. So.
All right. Well, we think you listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Go to Hell podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you love turkey, you can go to hell.
Yeah.
Gobble, gobble.